Good morning, everyone. I'm glad Bella mentioned that we're focusing with the speakers that are actual practitioners. I don't call myself an ESG expert, but more a board executive that has been given the responsibility of ensuring that my companies and my CEOs stay the course on this ESG journey. So this discussion is very appropriately named Navigating Strategy, Stakeholders, and Standards, because I think that's what we as board members really have to do in giving guidance and working with our teams to push the ESG agenda forward. So what am I talking about today? The outline of this conversation, and we can move on to the next slide, is really what's going on. The world is at a reset, and why this conversation really matters for countries in Africa, and what are the critical trends that we need in order to prepare for in 2026. As Bella said, there are so many. We focused on a number of them, and there are things that are top of mind as I work with some of the businesses that I am involved in. But most importantly, how do we take that trend and make it a believable strategy? How do we take action, and what's the road ahead of us? So the first point I wanted to make is that yes, and you can move on to slide 4, is that the world is indeed resetting in some way, right? We're resetting the sustainability compass, but I think this presentation and what we have to do needs to be rooted in really 5 key themes. First is that if you are integrating ESG into your strategy, into your core operations and your purpose, you will outperform other companies. Second critical thing is that we have to take it, that march on from voluntary commitment, which is where a lot of companies have been, to regulatory requirement. Even more companies are there, but it has to be something that marches towards measurable and desirable accountability for sustainability, for our companies, for the planet, for performance. The third key one to me is that, yes, Trump economics have hit us. And I would say it's not even Trump economics, I'd say it's Trump politics, and politics in general have hit us. And they appear to be threatening and putting ESG under pressure. So you've seen what appears to be a number of companies walking backwards, canceling what appear to be in green energy. You've even seen what happened with VW and the green washing that they appear to be moving forward with, and sort of canceling programs. BlackRock has appeared to cancel programs. But at the same time, there are people that are moving forward. I work with Imperial Brands. I work with a company called Bank of Africa. And then we have the CEO of Renewable here. They are marching forward, even though some say they have walked backwards, but it's not true. And the reality is that if you actually look at people who have canceled and reduced programs, it's actually only 12%. 75% have either continued or even deepened their investment in ESG. So again, it's the politics, it's the optics, but it's not necessarily the reality. And standardization and compliance will continue to be a focus, and that behooves us to get on that bandwagon as quickly as possible. So lastly, a winning firm makes ESG their business imperative. And because it's a business imperative and it has real performance, they will continue that march to sustainability. There's a study that was done, I believe it was a Reuters study, who showed that, in fact, all the CEOs who have walked backwards, they are all CEOs that have been in place for less than 3 years. Seasoned CEOs and seasoned boards have continued this march. So I think that's the tenet upon which we should look at these 10 trends and the 5 key ones for the continent. Please continue. So what are those top 10 trends that have been defined for 2026? 1, there's a regulatory push will continue from the European markets. And yes, some of the standards appear to have slackened in US run businesses and the US exchanges, but the Europeans are marching forward. Second one, that's important for us because we look quite a lot to those markets. Two, access for finance remains tied to ESG performance. It's nothing new, it will continue. Third, the focus on sustainable and inclusive growth remains. Fourth, climate change adaptation and resilience. Five, natural capital preservation and responsible resource management. Those two are significantly linked to number 6, right? And the fact that we need to strengthen accountability and transparency. And I think that's critical for our businesses, our markets, because we have a lot to demonstrate. 7, innovation in renewable energy and green technologies, a key one for African businesses. And then supply chain due diligence, yes, but more importantly, technology, and then the employee and the stakeholder voice. So for us, we're focusing on number 1, 6, 7, 9, and 10. At the end, you'll tell me if you agree, right? So why does this matter? And how do we connect these global shifts to what we see in our reality? I think the first one, and I don't believe that businesses do anything unless it actually brings them to their goals of growth or profits or impact, right? And in Africa, we continue to have a need to scale and institutionalize our businesses if we're going to play on the global stage. I look forward to a future when we have not the names of just an Aliko Dangote, but 20, 30, 40 others like him that global exchanges look to and say that this is actually a critical and institutional and scaled business on this continent. So that continues to be a need that we have. 2, we are part of a global supply chain, a global value chain. And that means that we have to be impacted by the KYC regulations, quality standards, and even the viral nature of communication. And so the new reporting and trade requirements remain critical for us. We have to be able to demonstrate where we are in that global value chain. We continue to seek funding. And we also continue to participate in the global financial market. So we have no choice but to align to those global standards. And then I think lastly, we all understand that there's both risk and opportunity in sustainability. And we don't want to risk being left behind. And we want the opportunity to lead, but with contextually relevant innovation and leverage for what makes the right thing, what is sensible for us in terms of our attempts to reduce costs of operations and also reduce FX dependency. So that's why it matters for us. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Next slide, please. So let's get into the implications of each of these trends. Number 1, that we said of the 10 that continue to make sense, right? This handshake across continents from Europe to Africa, right? And even the handshake in some ways from the North American continents to Africa. But UK and European regulators are driving standardization. And despite what we report in the pushback, there are a number of policies that the UK exchange has indeed sort of rolled back on, not because belief is any less, but because of the challenges and the cost in actually having companies report against it. And the challenge is one that I look at with a smile, being an African on a UK board, where the disclosures around ethnicity, the disclosures around nationality, and the level of detail that companies were going to have to get into reporting that to show that there was actually real diversity. The challenge came from the fact that many people don't even want to report and say that they are Black, they're white, they're Indian, and collecting the data became impossible. So yes, it appears to be a rollback, but there are some practical issues within that. I think the second thing is that, we will continue with these standards from IFRS and everywhere else. They continue to be a standard, and we are moving forward on that. So the sustainability regulations are indeed reshaping global supply chain expectations. That continues. And we as exporters want to align with our disclosures. We want to align and make sure that we have the due diligence processes so that we stay in the game. Part of a challenge to actually reduce FX exposure is to also be an exporter. Part of the challenge to grow, to move from, businesses that are exporting raw materials to businesses that are exporting finished goods is to be able to play within those standards and to show the due diligence to future importers of our products. Lastly, we need to, and I've spoken just about this, we need to be able to diversify our revenue streams, not just for growth, but also to manage our FX volatility. So that push is important for us, and it's actually necessary, and it's what is going to give us a continued advantage going forward. So if we look at the next slide and just a sort of a practicality, if you can move forward, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So this is just a quick snapshot of the regulations that continue to be important. And the first one is obviously ISSB, the IFRS S1 and 2, and setting that universal ESG reporting language. That's perhaps the most important one for us to focus on. Obviously, the EU CSRD, yes, it has come under some political challenges, but I think there's a way forward on that. The Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and then the EU Deforestation-Free Regulation. And that's key, banning imports of deforestation, linked to deforestation. And that is so important for this continent. And that is so important given the fact that we are known, natural resource exporters. And what we have to do is preserve our resources and actually focus much more on processed output than on raw material output. So the compliance isn't optional, but it's a passport towards a future advantage. IFRS sustainability standards, many are familiar with this. Phase 1 theoretically ended in 2023 for the early adopters. Phase 2 are the voluntary adopters. And only a subset of companies are actually getting to full IFRS S1 and S2 aligned disclosures. Some of that has to do with the ability to collect and report on the data, which I know Ria will talk to us about a little bit more. And then there's phase 3, the mandatory adoption, which is 2027 for significant private companies, and then 2030 for SMEs. And then phase 4, we hope that our government and government organizations will also get there. Toby is here, and Toby is, I believe, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, the only FMCG company in Nigeria has gone forward to actually really make sure that they enter phase 2 voluntary adopters, and he'll tell us why. So next slide, please. Second key one, strengthening accountability and transparency. Why do I believe this is critical for our businesses? We need to be better run. We need to be better run if we're going to scale. We need to be better run if we're going to really institutionalize. And we need to run better if we're going to play on that global stage. You cannot do that if we don't actually have accountability, if we don't have transparency, because they are really the basic building blocks to help us achieve this goal, particularly the goal of institutionalization. Many of our major companies in Nigeria that are operating in the trillions in some ways are very, very large SMEs, and they're still marching forward on truly creating institutions that will play on the stage of many, many global companies today. We still have that challenge. Secondly, investors, regulators across the world want verifiable, and I love this term, decision useful ESG information that they can trust. So again, that sits on accountability, it sits on transparency. Transparent reporting builds market trust, and it builds access to capital. So if I look at the next slide, what we're looking at here is what I call sometimes the neglected sphere. I think we've got to give ourselves pats on the back on this continent. We have made significant moves in terms of governance, but we still have a way to go. And that is on a performance, accountability, and responsibility, being on point fully with our financial reporting and our performance management. Many people laugh when I say that on my Imperial Brands board, I have twice as a non-exec, independent, I have twice a year performance appraisal. That am I actually doing my job? And we get scored. And I get a development profile that I need of things I need to improve on for the next year. But more importantly, when we go into details with our executives on how we're measuring their annual performance, how we're measuring their LTIP, part of the LTIP and indeed annual performance measure is their performance on their ESG metrics. It forms 10% of their evaluation score, 10%. And I think that, you know, the other thing about their performance measures is that it is fully aligned to the things that we want to demonstrate from a performance point of view to our stakeholders, our investors, and even, you know, our employees. So we believe that we're trying to get our governance architecture right to ensure that we're focused on strategy, focused on ESG, and that is moving down in terms of how we evaluate the performance of the business as a whole, but also our executives and also our board committees. And so the architecture that we have, what's the role of the board? What are the right committees, the board diversity, executives, management, the managers, the workforce, and the stakeholders, all the way down. And that is confirming the role of the board as the highest governance body in ensuring due diligence, ensuring that our processes, and we've identified the type of lasting impact that we have on our economy and government people. Anti-corruption, I don't want to go into too details, but we have a role in that. The policies, the conduct, internal controls, and really making sure that we are looking at confirmed incidents and taking action. I was interested to see some of the reporting on some of the issues that we've had in oil and gas businesses, some of the lawsuits that are going on, which come right down to governance issues. And the fact that many of our new indigenous oil and gas companies are making significant strides in moving their boards forward, moving ESG forward, because they take it seriously. Public policy conflicts of interest, and having robust independence and enforcement power from the board of directors. Governance shouldn't be a neglected sphere on our continent. It is an important, I think, lever for performance, and it goes right back into that trend of accountability and transparency. The next slide, please. So trend number 3, innovation in renewable energy and green technologies. I think for many of us, we remain, quote unquote, the dark continent. One, not just because we aren't as powered as other continents, but we have a high cost of traditional energy solutions. I think we need to continue looking at renewable energy, not just because of climate action, but because of energy security and cost efficiency. And we've seen South Africans make a very big stride forward in renewables when their entire grid and fossil fuel grid network was challenged because of lack of investment and many other reasons. And you've seen them actually make a turnaround. That same opportunity exists for many of us on this continent. And depending on the sector of business that you're in, managing energy usage, managing fossil fuel dependency, and greenhouse emissions are going to be a must-have, not a compliance issue. If you're in, and I think Nkem will speak about this later, but if you are in businesses that use a significant amount of AI, businesses that need to be truly networked, this becomes not a nice to have. You're in a data warehouse business. This becomes not a nice to have, it becomes a must have. And it is also a compliance issue, an issue for the stakeholders and activists, quite frankly, that you may have to contend with going forward. So we have an opportunity that local innovations and partnerships can also de-risk our green investments and actually help us with our cost of energy and therefore the ability to increase productivity of our industries. And I think even to a certain extent, Toby at Unilever can speak a little bit to this as well. So that's key trend number 3. If we go on to an example here of the trend, there are many new business opportunities and case studies, and I won't dwell on this, but I think the key point here is looking at how a PPA, cross-border energy, how we can aggregate solar projects into a portfolio of long-term PPAs, and having a significant group of corporate customers can actually lead us to diversification of our energy use, reduce our costs, and also, give us some credit-worthy impacts in our business and achieve in terms of our IFRS objectives. I sit on the advisory committee for All On, and I'm so proud of what that investment business is doing in terms of enabling rural businesses to cut energy costs by 70%, to boost revenues in some companies through the use of solar mini grids. And I think it is well worth looking at some of what they have done and others who are actually investing in some of these companies, not just because there is financial opportunity there, but because of the real impact that they're actually having in localized areas, some of the innovative solutions that are coming to pass. So if I look at another slide, please, next slide. We can move forward on you, please. Trend number 4, technology, AI, data, and how it's actually impacting ESG. I think we all understand that there are 2 sides to this, yeah? And I spoke about this earlier. There's high climate impact, obviously, which is negative. But there's actually a lot of positivity in how it can actually assist us, not just in terms of reporting transparency, business transparency, but also business efficiency and our ability to enhance productivity. I think we all understand that we live on this continent in, I think, a very talent-strapped world. So how do we actually facilitate AI to assist us in dealing with, yes, some of the routine things that we have been using talent for, take that talent, upskill them to do more impactful work, more high-end work that cannot be done by AI? How do we simplify our businesses? So we can also leverage AI in terms of how we engage with stakeholders. And I have seen some of the innovative things that we are doing, for example, at Imperial Brands, using consumer data, collecting this data to help us in our product innovation journey, testing, simulating consumer reaction to the products, facilitating our marketing drive, because we can actually mine the information, develop campaigns, test campaigns, and discard those that we know will not have impact. So it's reduced our spend in our marketing campaigns hugely, because we're actually using the information to understand the consumer. We're using it to develop our products. Why can't we do the same on this continent where rapid product innovation, particularly in the consumer goods industry, is actually important and drives growth? We can enable AI for smarter talent resourcing and really moving colleagues around, internal mobility, upskilling. I, in my own business, have leveraged AI tools in terms of actually doing the testing, doing the behavioral analytics to ensure that we're actually trying to get the right type of staff what is the term that people often use? Making sure that we put round pegs into round holes. And it is actually, I get hundreds of applications for just one job. And we need to be able to cycle through that as quickly as possible so that we can actually find the talent. How many of us are actually leveraging that to improve our HR? And then the digital dashboards, enabling real-time monitoring, enabling stakeholder management, enabling stakeholder engagement. So there's a lot that we can do around that. And I think it is a key trend for us on this continent to master. Number 5. If we move forward, I'm just conscious of time. There are a couple of case studies here. I think at your leisure, it would be helpful to really see what MTN has actually done with their AI and leveraging data, their data management system to support real-time analysis and their reporting to investors and regulators. They've got a really fantastic sustainability report that I think is a very good example for many of us to have a good look at. But it has cut their reporting turnaround time by over 40% and ensured that they're aligning their disclosures, GRI, SASB standards, IFRSB standards. And again, we've all been, and Tinu, I hope you'll speak to us, there's so many standards out there, and there's so many tools that we can use to report. How do we align and make sure that we're ticking the right boxes and the data is cutting across? PalmPay, 30 million users, 1 million SME merchants, and really leveraging digital financial services to actually create inclusiveness and empower excluded populations. They've used the automation and they've used AI so that they can quickly onboard, fraud detection, customer support via chatbots, and other app features. And I think we're going to see a number of financial institutions have to move quickly, but AI has really helped the nano banks and the financial services move faster and actually capture customers perhaps faster than many of our traditional banks thought they actually ever would. And let's see how we can actually use that to fully enable our own businesses. So number 5, the stakeholder voice. The S pillar is not going away on our continent. We all know that it is not just about CSR, but it actually includes our most critical resource, and that is talent. And how do we speak to them? How do we understand that talent? How do we bring that voice? How do we develop employee engagement, trust, inclusion, development of their skills and capabilities and manage their performance? And for those of you who have also implemented policies where you have remote workers, you all know the importance of managing that voice, leveraging data technology to reach them, but to also create a culture and bring them in. The employee voice for us at Imperial Brands has been extremely important. And it has actually created not just product innovation, product development, but in a very difficult industry, it's actually what has also allowed us to ensure that we manage turnover and that we increase the staff's productivity. We need to be able to listen to that because that's a challenge that we are all facing on this continent, really upskilling and building the voice of the employee. It's a scarce resource and we need to align it to business needs. So it's a business imperative, helps us build purpose-driven businesses, diverse and inclusive businesses. And the employee is our most credible sustainability ambassador. Let's understand how we can actually use them more. Diversity of perspective. I think we have all seen the benefit. And so that internal, and I look at our board members, board executives, and management, they are an important stakeholder voice in moving our businesses forward. So if we move on to the next slide. Many companies have done this well. I think sometimes we can look at a bank like Access as a double-edged sword in the sense that they have done an awful lot. They continue to have their challenges, but they also are listening to employees and trying to offer very flexible work arrangements that support work and life balance. Jumia was at one point nominated the best in HR practice in Nigeria because of their ability to engage and develop and retain talent in that organization. So again, I think you've got that example in Jumia. When you have a chance, take a look at it and see what you can learn from that. Next one, please. Next. So what's the road ahead? Simply to say that I think the next 12 to 18 months will separate people who are just complying from people who actually want to be leaders. The time is now to refocus and realign your strategy, deepen that ESG performance by applying local insight to a global standard. And again, I started off by saying that I really believe in this, and I think the future belongs to companies that prove impact and deliver value sustainably. Move forward, please. So one of the companies I work with, Bank of Africa, they are driving transformation through ESG integration. And I have seen this company focus on these 5 trends and build initiatives that are actually addressing each one. 1, from necessity, 2, because of belief, and 3, because of the impact on performance. I'm just going to pick one as an example, because I've spoken to a few. But they are financing renewable energy products. They deploy green branches that are fully powered by solar. And we've seen a significant reduction in our cost to income ratio because of that. They've integrated fully ESG KPIs into staff evaluation. And they've actually launched the sustainability training programs across all their African operations because they want to embed purpose-driven perspective into their businesses. So it can be done. Again, I'm very happy at different times to talk to you about what they're doing, but it is an example. And a lot of their initiatives are actually available online. They publish a fantastic sustainability report that actually outlines this, and it is an integral part of their business strategy. So in closing, if we can just move on. We've got to move from trend to action. It is possible to build effective ESG strategies. There are many companies doing that. If you need to look for a source of information, we've just given a few examples here. But I think the key thing is making sure that we embed these KPIs into our performance systems. We have feedback loops. We focus on materiality of what drives impact and value and values in addition to that. And move from reporting to actually integrating it as a key pillar into your business. And then lastly, for all of us on this continuum, we need to continue to strengthen governance and our data and culture as foundational enablers. And I think that brings me to the last slide. Thank you.